We're now on Daf Ches Hamid Beis, and we're having now another answer to our question from the Debei Rabbi Shmuel. Minayom asher tziva Hashem v'hol l'dorosechem. So the mitzvah over there was given as the first mitzvah to Klal Yisrael. Ezi mitzvah she nemra bat chila. Right? We have Anochi Hashem Elokecha, but that's not really a mitzvah. But the first mitzvah have the Omer Zu Avodas Kocham. Gemara rejects this and says, "Well, Amar Mar, what about Mora? Eser mitzvahs Tzava Yisrael b'Mora. Tichsiv Vayomer Shema Tishmel Kol Hashem Elokech." So we cannot assume that Avodah Zarah was the first mitzvah that they got at Har Sinai, because already before they arrived at Har Sinai at Mora, they received 10 different mitzvahs. Ela Machvarta Kinim Hashini Lakar will have to take the answer of either of Yeshua ben Levi or of Rebbe, and this leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Ches Amud Beis. Ein chayoven al esei v'al losa sesha b'migdash. The Torah says that if you violate b'shogeg the kedusha of the migdash by being metame the migdash, tumas migdash v'kadashav, then you bring what's called a korban ola v'yored. And in the case of an essay, well, essay is a little complicated, but losas shebemigdash, if there was a violation by the entire community based on a mistaken hora, there's no par helim dov shel tzibur, because the bezdin is not chayev a par helim dov shel tzibur for something which, for a yachid, for an individual, would incur a chiyuv of a korban ola v'yor. V'yein mevi'in asham tolui al esei v'al losa shebemigdash. And likewise, any violation of tumas migdash v'kadashav that generates a chiyuv korban ola v'lo is excluded from an asham tolui. Aval chayavim al esei v'al losa shebenida. However, in the case of Nida, where the Torah says that you should make sure that she's not a Nida before you have relations, that's an essay, and the Torah says if you know that she's a Nida, you have to abstain, is in that case, if there was a Hora B'tos of the Bezdin in Nida, then there would be a Par Helim Dovashal Tzibur. Umeviyim Hashem Tolui al Esev al Losa Shebenida, and likewise, not only is Nida subject to and included in the parsha of Par Helim Dovashal Tzibur, but also it's included in the parsha of Oshem Tolui. So a man doesn't know if he had a relationship with a nida, he has to bring a korban Oshem. Ezi mitzvah seisha b'nida. What are you talking about, mitzvah seisha b'nida? Nida is losa se prosh min nida. The Torah says that you should separate yourself from a nida. Mitzvah losa se al tavo al nida. Binani mili. From whence do we derive this conclusion that tzibur lo mechayiv korban bi'alma, that the tzibur that violated in the case of tumas migdash v'kadashav, which is subject to a korban ola v'yoreh, there's no chiyuv of par helim dovashal tzibur. V'yachid asham tolui nami lo. And an individual is not chayav a korban asham tolui for tumas migdash v'kadashav. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi nemar v'ashem b'chatos u'b'ashem tolui v'nemar v'ashem u'b'tzibur, tzibur meaning with regard to a korban ola v'yored, it says v'im kol adas shel yishku v'nelam dov meini akol v'yosu achas mikol mitzvah sher lo tasena v'yashemu, excuse me, and v'yashemu is identical with v'yashem, just it's plural as opposed to yachid. Ma v'yashem b'yachid b'chatos kvua. So we're talking now about an individual who violated a chiyuv karis b'shogeg, and the din is that he brings a chatos kvua. Afia shemu b'tzibur v'chatos kvua, as opposed to a carbon olaviore, which is not called a carbon chatos kvua. Umat tzibur v'chatos kvua. Afashim toli nami ein ba el al sofik chatos kvua. Amri ihachi, if this be the case that the Gzeres Shava v'Yashem v'Yashemu is the source for this halacha, then carbon olav yored nami. Haksiv v'hayaki yesham li achas mi ele. So we have the pasuk yesham. So why don't you derive the Gzeres Shava straight, straight to the parsha of carbon olav yored? Donim Ashim in Ashemu, the ain't Donim Ashim in Yesham. Okay, these are typical and technical rules that govern a Gzeira Shava. Umaynaf Gemina. In other words, what difference to make whether it's Ashem and Yesham or it's Ashem and Ashemu? But Tanid Veichizke V'Shava Koine Vaka, and we have a Gzeira Shava that is not really similar. I mean, it's not really the same word at all. V'shav uba, zui shiva, zui bia. So you see that you can connect two psukim and create a Gzeira Shava, even though the psukim are not exactly the same. The language is different. And from this brisa, we see that two unidentical words can be linked through a Gzeira Shava if they convey a similar meaning. Therefore, even a Gzeira Shava v'Ashem and v'Yesham should be acceptable. And v'Odin, furthermore, Nelev min v'Ashem mitumas migdash v'kadashov v'chsiv v'hu tamei v'Ashem. So even in the parsha of Tumas Migdash Shtater v'Karban Olav Yorim, we have the pasuk v'Yashem. Omar Rav Papa Donim v'Ashem u'mitzvos Hashem min v'Yashemu u'mitzvos Hashem. So when we're talking about an Asham Tolui, we're not going to derive the halach of Asham Tolui from the parsha of Karban Olav Yored, even though the word via Ashem does appear there, because we're looking for the phrase mitzvahs Hashem, and it doesn't appear there at all. Amalei Rav Shimi bar Ashi Rav Papa v'nelev v'Ashem unesias avon min v'Ashem unesias avon. In the parsha of Asham Tolu, it says v'Ashem, and it says nesias avon. And in the pasuk of Karban Olav Yored, it likewise says v'Ashem unesias avon. Elam Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak donim v'Ashem u'mitzvah Hashem asher lo tasena mi v'Ashem or v'Hashemu u'mitzvah Hashem asher lo tasenu v'al yochiach shmias kol u'bitus hasayim v'tumas mikdash v'kadashav shelo nemar behem v'Ashem u'mitzvah Hashem asher lo tasenu. And this leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Ches Amud Beis. Again, there are a lot of technical drushes here. Ein chayav al shmias kol. So now we're talking about a shvua, the al bitis vasayim. Right, so shmias kol is when I hear your shvua, and let's say I say amen. And bitis vasayim is where I took a false oath with my own lips. The altumas mikdash v'kadosh v'nasi v'kayotze behen. And just like the Bezdin is potter from Shmias Kol or Bitis Vasayim or Tumas Mikdash, so to a Nasi is treated like this with the same halacha as the Bezdin, and he's potter from bringing karbanos for any of the above violations. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Agli. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Hanasi Chai B'Kulan. The Nasi has to bring a karban for all of the above violations, with the exception of chutz mishmias hakol. And why is that so? Because the nasi has the same status as a melech. The melech lo don v'lo donan oso v'lo meid v'lo meidin oso. So shmias hakol is referring to a shvua that's imposed on one of the Bali Dinim by Bezdin. And a king cannot be judged, nor can he testify, nor can anyone testify against him. So therefore, says Rabbi Kiva, the nasi cannot be chayev for shmias kol. Omar Ula, my time at Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says that a nasi is potur from a carbon oliviorid in all cases. Omar Kravaya ki yesham li achas me'el. So the pasuk seems to indicate that with regard to a carbon oliviorid, it's when a person will be guilty regarding one of these matters. Anyone who be included in the chiyuv for all of them is likewise chayav for all of them. But she'eim is chayav the achas, if one of them is outstanding and is the exception, is einem is chayav b'kulan. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yossi, when it says v'hoyaki yesham li'achas mi'elu, what's li'achas mi'elu? It means any one of these matters. So therefore, if the person would theoretically incur a chiyuv carbon for transgressing any of the three sins listed in that pasuk, he is therefore subject to the offering the carbon for whichever one he transgresses. But if for some reason he cannot possibly incur an offering in any one of these three cases indicated by the pasuk, then he's excluded from bringing the carbon, even if he transgresses the other cases that are mentioned. So since the king is not subject to the law of hearing a voice of adoration, right, it's excluding from edus, he's also exempt from the carbon oliviorid, even in the case of tumas mikdash v'kadoshav, or in the case of bitui shvua sheker. Gemara counters v'ema mischayev b'achas mehen b'afal pisha eno mischayev b'kulan. How do you know that it's only if he's chayiv in all of them? And therefore, the Gemara wants to substitute another explanation for Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Elamei Hacha. This Sanya we learned in a Brisa, and here we'll learn a few lines on Daf Tes. Haya Rabbi Yirmiyah Omer. Nemar, it says in the parsha of Karvan Olav Yored, here on the top of Daf Tes, Lo Sagia Yodo. Notice he doesn't have enough money to pay for a sheep, to pay for a goat, and if he brings two birds, one for a chatas and one for an olav, and it says lo tasig yodo. And we find the same language, or similar language, lo tasig yodo, which is taking his chiyuv down to a lower level because he doesn't even have the means to buy the birds. And therefore he brings asiris ha'efa of kemach soles for chatos. Misha boli de anius v'ashirus yotza nasi u'mashiach she'ein boim lidei anius. Nasi dichsiv v'osav achas mikol mis Hashem elokov. Misha ein al gabav el Hashem elokov. Mashiach dichsiv v'akoin ha'godol mi'echov. Shu gadol me'echav b'noi, b'koach, b'chachma u'va'osh. Minayin, achem lo minayin she'ein lo gadleu mishalachiv. So if the Kohen Gadol doesn't have the means, then the other Kohanim will have to exalt him by giving him possessions. Talmud lomar v'akohen ha'gadol me'echav asher yutzak al rosho. Anyway, we see that neither the Nasi nor the Kohen Mashuach can ever be aniyin. So since the whole concept of a korban ol v'yored is imposed on people who might not have the wherewithal to bring an expensive, superior carbon, the Nasi and the Kohen Mashiach are completely excluded from bringing a carbon olav yori because they're not included under Aniyus. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop for today, and the Mitzvah same time tomorrow.